650 scientists walked into a conference in Finland. Some of them had PhDs, some of them were 12 years old, some of them were fishermen who used to hate dolphins. This is Who Gets to Do Science, a podcast episode from the European Citizen Science Project, and today we're at the ECSA 2026 conference, exploring what citizen science actually means when we stop being polite about it. I'm Aishwarya Vishwamitra, your host for this series. Let's get into it. A quick question before we start. Think about the last time you contributed to science not professionally, just as a person, a citizen. Now ask yourself, did science feel like something that was open to you?
In Victorian times, it was really only the people who had wealth and privilege as well who could take part in science. I guess that's always been the way.
That's Joseph Roach from Trinity College Dublin, and he said that with the kind of tired recognition that suggests he wasn't entirely sure things had changed. That's the kind of conversation I want to have today. I'm at the ECSA conference in Oulu, Finland, the European Citizen Science Association's 6th conference with over 650 people in the room. The energy is genuinely infectious. People are passionate, creative, collaborative, but I kept asking a question that made people pause. Is citizen science actually inclusive? Or does it just feel like it is?
I would say as it is right now, not. I would love for it to be that way, but I think it's still a very selective group of people that actually can do citizen science. So the ones that have the time and the resources and don't have to, let's say, worry about something else.
That's Leo Menzel from ECSA, and I appreciated that they didn't soften it. The default participant in citizen science, the person who shows up, who has time, who has a smartphone and Wi-Fi and a free Saturday, is already a particular kind of person. When you only reach that person, you're not doing inclusion, you're doing outreach to the already included. But here's where it gets more complicated. Because Leo also pointed out that exclusion doesn't only mean being left out due to lack of resources. On one end, there are people who can't participate because they don't have access. On the other end, there are communities who have to participate because no one else is going to document what's happening to them. That's a very different relationship with science. And then there's a third group, one I hadn't thought about.
So one community we worked very hard to engage, for instance, that are not part of citizen science and are hard to reach was the industry. So they are in no way or means vulnerable, but have a lot of power to bring to citizen science. They have a lot of opportunity. They have funding. They have knowledge. They have opportunity, space. And so we worked very hard to engage them.
That's Carolina Doran, who coordinates the ECS project at ECSA. Hard to reach is a spectrum, and sometimes the people hardest to move are the ones with the most power, which raises a question. When we talk about inclusion in citizen science, are we also talking about power? Who gets to ask the question? Who holds the data? Who decides what counts as evidence? I don't want this to be a doom episode because alongside these honest tensions, I heard some genuinely remarkable stories about what happens when citizen science is designed around a community's actual needs, rather than just a researcher's agenda.
In this pilot, we participated also Science for Change, and we worked with older adults. And what we had to do with them was to map others with an app that is called Other Collect, and they had to use it to map others and see if they were bad or good and so on. And what happened is that they were not really interested in technology or in using the app. So we changed things around. We kept flexible, which is one of the main indications to be inclusive. And we ended up doing activities that didn't involve technology. They involved other mapping and also getting back to their memories from when they were younger, to their stories, through others. So we find ways in which others would be meaningful for them and not only for us. So I think that that's a really beautiful story. And then they ended up doing an arts exhibition with it, and it was really cool.
Mireia from Science for Change was describing a pilot project in Spain in 2024. The original plan was data collection through an app. That didn't work, so they listened. And what came out was something closer to memory work, an art exhibition made from scent, story. That's not a failure of citizen science. That's citizen science doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
So the approach was not trying to make biodiversity monitoring accessible to a new community, which is a fine goal, but it didn't work out so much because the community has different needs. and they refocused their project on the needs of the community.
Stephanie from the Center for Social Innovation Vienna was describing a project with the deaf and hard of hearing community in Greece, one that pivoted away from biodiversity monitoring to focus on what the community actually needed, making the city more accessible and getting those needs in front of policymakers. The lesson both Mireia and Stephanie are pointing to is the same. Start with what the community wants to solve, not what you want to measure. And sometimes what gets solved surprises everyone, including the researcher.
This one fisherman who was so angry with the mammals that were eating his fish. And after the end of the work we did together, or not me, but the responsible partner, he knew all the names of the dolphins. He got super engaged in preserving them because he understood the role they play in the entire ecosystem and how actually it's beneficial for him in the end to maintain those dolphins.
Citizen science didn't give him data, it gave him a relationship. Carolina coordinates this work across dozens of partner organizations: fishing communities, farming communities, remote communities in Greenland, communities for people who are hard of hearing. And she told me the thing she's proudest of isn't the platform or the policy outputs, even though those are incredible. It's the moments when someone's entire relationship to the natural world shifts. Those moments, she said, are the legacy.
Empowerment actually requires a transfer of power. Instead of we, the scientists, standing up in front of the community and presenting the issue, it was no, the power to present things is over to you, the participants, because you've done the work, you should tell your community, and you know enough about the science to tell them.
A transfer of power, not a transfer of information. That framing matters because citizen science can mean many things. It can mean asking people to click images to train a model, or it can mean handing the microphone to someone who's never felt like science was theirs and watching what they do with it.
So it has been very impressive to go from a country that didn't have citizen science really established to now a country that has a network, has a platform, and really I think it's just the beginning of a great citizen science story.
Beatrice was talking about Romania, a country that 3 years ago had almost no citizen science infrastructure and now has a national network and platform largely built through the ECS's ambassador program. One motivated person in one country making something from nothing. That's structural change, and it starts with inclusion, with deciding that Romania belongs in this story too. I want to end with something that surprised me, because I expected this conference to run on hope, on the confidence that things are moving in the right direction. And some of that is here, but so is something that I did not expect to hear, something really honest.
Oh God, I wish it was hope. I think I'm probably motivated by guilt. I think a big factor for me is thinking how many things had to break in my favor for me to have such a lovely job and career. I got so lucky at so many points in time that I think I'm very aware of that all the time, that how it could have been very different for me if I hadn't been so lucky to have support and people around me who helped me. So I think that guilt is probably a big motivator.
Joseph went on to say that if he met someone on the street, he wouldn't lead with citizen science. He'd lead with connection, with what they were afraid of, what they needed.
So I'd like to try and find ways to connect with someone on the street in terms of what they worry about, what their fears are, what their needs are, because they're probably the same as my own. And I think if you start at that point from a position of connection, then you can maybe get to, okay, well, what do they feel about science or research? What do I feel about science or research?
And there, I think, is the whole argument. Inclusion isn't a feature you bolt onto a project after the research questions have already been designed. It's the starting connection. It begins before science does. I came to this conference for two reasons. One was to meet the people behind the ECS project, the coordinators, the ambassadors, the researchers, who've all spent 3 years trying to build something that lasts. The other was more personal. My own PhD research on endometriosis relies entirely on the voices of participants, on people who've been understudied, underbelieved, and over-asked for their stories without always seeing something change in return. Both of those reasons brought me to the same question. So when I ask whether citizen science is actually inclusive, It's not abstract for me. What I heard here suggests the tools are real, the examples are real, the transformation that happens when a community is given the means to document its own experience, that's real. But Leo said it plainly. As of right now, it's still a selective group. And that's not a criticism to file away for the next conference. That's the work.
It means a lot to me because it just makes me feel a lot calm and quite happy. More science, I'd like to see a lot more nature involved in science and a lot more children talking about nature. So
I'll leave you with that. A child from Nottingham at her first ever academic conference running her own survey on whether people feel like they belong in nature. She's already doing the work. Thank you for listening. This has been Who Gets to Do Science, a podcast episode on the series by the European Citizen Science Association. I'll see you in the next one.